Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of El Jefe's Shop. This week we're going to try and finish off some small jobs on the toyoace that have been bugging me for weeks. Alright, so there's a bunch of half-finished jobs on this thing and it's been bugging me for weeks. So I need to just try and finish off those last little bits of each of the projects and then we can start on something new. So I've got a list under the camera here. So I've got to bolt on the rear fan and wire it, which should be pretty easy now that the radiator is mounted. Need to mount the passenger coils, which I'm not looking forward to, and then shorten the coil wires. I extended them all like a meter and they only need to be about, say, 400 mil. So they're quite long. I need to shorten those. The fuel filter has a leak on one of the hose clamps. Super easy fix, I just have to dig through 1,000 hose clamps to find the right one. The intake air temp bung and sensor. So I need to take the intake off, drill a hole for the bung, weld that guy on, and then shorten the wiring and plug the sensor in. Should be a pretty quick job. Then the front fan, I need to redo that shroud and wire it up. So that should be pretty easy. I'm gonna need to take it to someone to get welded later, but I can pretty much fumble my way through the rest of it up until the point where I need to get it welded. And then the front mounts on the tray need to get refabricated. So one's a little bit too short and the other one I don't like. So I'm gonna cut both of them off, start again. So that should be pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It's just a lot of grinding and laying on the back and trying to weld to rust, which doesn't go very well. And then the last one is the alternator wiring and starter wiring. So the alternator and starter wiring goes into the cab and pretty much goes up to the fuse box. I just need to finish that last little bit. So I need to put the light in for the actual alternator check light. So that actually turns the alternator on. So I need to mount that guy up and finish the wiring there. So it should be all pretty simple. I just need to actually get into it and get it done. So I'll try and do all these half jobs this episode. Wish me luck. All right, job number one. I'm gonna start with the easiest thing on the list, fixing the fuel leak on the fuel filter. All right, with the fuel filter fixed, I'm gonna move into the cabin. So there's a few wires here that I need to sort out, and then this sensor. So I'm gonna start here just because. So what I need to do is drill a hole in the intake pipe, which is this guy off the front here, and weld on a little boss like this, and then the sensor can plug into that boss, into the top of the intake, and then I can shorten this wiring. So let's get into that. I'll just take this intake off, and then I can drill a hole in it, weld it up, put it back in. So I want to put the sensor on the top, up behind this bar here. So I'll just mark there, right about there. So if this sensor gets welded on, so if the bung gets welded on and the sensor is put there, that should be nice and clearanced. So then that boss will go there, so that's all good. Alright, so while I wait for the intake paint to dry, I'm going to wire up this alternator light. So what I'm going to use is a guard light from a previous car, IS300 maybe, doesn't matter. So all it is just a small globe, and you can use a resistor if you don't want the actual globe, so that's just a nice little handy tip. But I would like the globe because it shows you that the alternator is actually working. So what I'm going to do is, this actually fits in here really snug. So what I'm going to do is just mount it there, like that. But what I'm going to do is the wiring. So this wire comes from the alternator. It's going to go to the negative side of this light. And then the positive side of this light just needs to go to a fused ignition source, which everything in this truck is ignition. So I'm going to go off of this relay block here, put a fuse in, wire it out to this guy, wire the other side up to the alternator, done. So when you turn the key on, this light will come on. Once the engine starts and the alternator starts working, this light will turn off. So pretty simple little system, so we'll get that out of the way. And then I need to run on the starter wire, which is already up to the floor here. So let's get into this. And that's the starter motor and the alternator wired up. Alright, so I did the intake off camera, shorten these wires up a bit, so they're still plenty of length there, but they're not massively long and out of the way. Intake's back in, painted, so that's done. The starter wiring's done, the alternator's done. I just need to test them. So what I'm going to do is turn the key on, which is this guy here. So we should have a nice little light. And if it cranks, the starter works, and if the light goes out once it's running, the alternator works. Engine turns over, so the starter motor wiring is correct. The light goes off, which makes me think the alternator is working, but the battery sucks. So I don't have another battery. I've tried all of them. So that's a future problem for future Jeff, but pretty sure it's all wired correctly. All right, so the next job is going to be incredibly hard to film. So I need to wire up these fans, and I also need to bolt them to the radiator itself. So it should be pretty crazy. It's just the wiring is there and the bolts are just there as well. So everything's going to be really awkward to get to. Not sure how I'm going to film this one. If I do, you will see. If I don't, you will not see. All right, so I'm not going to be able to film this, but the top two are the negative and the bottom two are the positive. So the bottom positive on this side is this fan closest to me. The bottom positive on the right hand side is the other fan. So I need to wire both of those up to the fan switch. One's normally for AC or extra overheating, and the top two are just earths. So I'm just going to wire them all up so they all come on when it starts getting hot. And just off that small test, putting the battery on there, there's a fair bit of air coming out of this thing and out the side here. So that's promising. So I'm going to wire this up and I'll get back to you when it's done. All right, it took a fair while. I've got the fans wired up. I still haven't bolted them on, but I'll get to that. So under here, got the wiring on the right hand side there, runs all the way across the cross member and then joins up to the wiring I ran months ago. That goes to the fuel pump and the fan, so it's all ready to go. So I got a piece of paper, chuck it on the tray, and this should blow that piece of paper, hopefully off the tray, but at least in the air a little bit. Sweet, that's good. So there's a fair bit of wind here, as you can hopefully see. And then on the side as well, there's a fair bit. So I think that'll be alright. Hopefully, paper test proves out it can cool the motor. Alright, so we're getting through the list pretty quickly. So the next job is to try and fix this fan shroud and make it fit in the truck, and then wire up the front fan once it's all mounted. So I'm going to cut off 30mm here, I'm going to cut off 30mm along here. I'm going to cut off this entire thing and then re-bend this so it's a bit shorter. And then this side's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to have to probably shorten it a little bit. So I'm going to get into jigsawing and hopefully it doesn't take too long. Hopefully I can save this thing. Unfortunately, I have to cut off a bunch of the number, which I kind of wanted to keep because this was obviously a street sign, but that's not going to work. So cut it off, re-bend it. Alright, so I managed to get this to fit a whole lot nicer. Obviously this cut's a little awkward, a few of them are a bit awkward. I'll probably wrap them in tape anyway, or some kind of foil tape or foam or something like that to try and keep some of the air from just sucking through there instead of the radiator. And then side to side, they're pretty good. Just need to bend them in a little bit more so that we can get them welded. And then the other side, I can't really show you, but it's the same as this side. So the only exception is for the cutout for the radiator cap. So if I could plate that, that'd be really good, but we'll see how we go. So I think that should fit. It's definitely better, and I can't make it much smaller. So I'm really hoping that it fits under the truck. So I'm going to remount the radiator, and then I'll try and put this fan and fan shroud back on, just temporarily for now, and we'll see how we go. If it all fits, then I'm happy sailing, and I can wire it up and then get it welded at a later date. If it doesn't fit, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, so I've got the radiator in place, got the fan shroud just duct taped on for now. So just to make sure it all fits, and it all fits pretty well. So this is the very front edge, nice and sealed. Got the fan which is blowing down, and then it's all pretty well fitting everywhere, and it actually fits, which is a huge bonus over the last time. So I've tested this, it all works, it's all wired up, all a bit temporary at the moment, so I'm gonna have to pull all this back out and get it welded. So pretty happy with that. Can tick that off the list and move on to the next job. All right, with another job done, we're back on the list. So I'm gonna mount the passenger coils, I'm gonna shorten the coil wires, I've got to mount the front of the tray. So I don't want to do the coils, so I'm gonna do the tray first, and then I'll mount those coils, and then I can shorten all the wires, and then I'll move on to the next job, because there's still heaps to do. All right, so to fix this tray mount, all I need to do is chop this guy off and then remake something between this hole here and the tray. So should be pretty quick, should be pretty easy. So I need to do this on both sides, but I'm not gonna bore you with the details because it's gonna be a bit fiddly and really awkward, so I'll just show you when I'm done. All right, a little bit of time later, got the front tray mounts bolted up. So they're just a piece of RHS with a piece of angle on either end. Just a healthy amount of weld and a couple of bolts. They're all pretty solid. Not the prettiest thing, but neither is the rest of it, and that's kind of the point. So they're done. Next thing to do is mount the coil packs and shorten the coil pack wiring on both sides. So let's jump into that. All right, it's been a while since I've shown you anything in the engine bay and the coil packs situation. So because of this manifold, the coil packs normally mount up here, but because of this manifold, they have to mount down the bottom. So on the passenger side, they're mounted to the chassis rail. On this side, that didn't fit properly, so I'll show you what I've got at the moment. All right, so on this side, the coil wires come down from the spark plugs, and the coils are just sort of swinging in the breeze. So I need to make some kind of mount for those to the chassis rail, ideally. On this side, there's a fuel pressure regulator just behind here, and that's why I couldn't mount them the same as the other side. But I'm hoping I can get away with doing something similar and just bolt them to this guy. So I'll jump into that. All right, so I've got this bank of coil packs. They're nice and mounted now. So what I did in the front is put a small spacer in there, and in the back I just did a 90-degree off of the chassis rail down here, which is really awesome to show you. But as you can see, the fuel pressure regulator was in the way of the coils, so it all mounts in there now. It's all just really tight and really awkward and hard to show on camera. So that's done. Now to tidy up some wiring, but I know that's boring for you guys, so I'll leave you out of that one. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the toyoace. There's a lot of little jobs off the list and felt pretty productive. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.